Grazia eventually reached Constantinople, the sister, Brianda or Reina, was always angry over the fact that she was cut out really of the entire estate, okay? That Donna Grazia controlled everything. She was the widow of Francisco, whose capital created entire Mendes fortune, and she and her daughter basically split the entire fortune with a little bit left over for other relatives. But Donna Grazia said, quite rightly, she's had to spend so much cleaning up the mess that Brianda had made in Venice that she wasn't going to give her a farthing. That's, I think, the word I used last time. So let's see. Shenimtsa. We're going to talk a little about minhag because the Portuguese law that gave Donna Grazia the almost entire body of the estate could be called a minhag. And let's take the basic distinction made by the Rashbash, Rabbi Shlomo ben Shimon Duran, the son of the famous Tashbetz, whom we learned about. Okay, so he is, of course, 15th century Algiers, and in addition to being the posek who succeeded his father, he was also a doctor and an astronomer. Just for you, Jean, he was an astronomer too, the Rashbash, but he also was a polemicist. He wrote a book called Milchemet Mitzvah, in which he tried to defend the Talmud against the attacks of a certain Yoshua Lorki. Now, Yoshua Lorki was a Jew, Spanish Jew. And he became a Meshumad and became an apostate. And as many apostates did, he out-poped the Pope in his hatred of Judaism. So he brought about a disputation in Tortosa, and of course the rabbis were always pushed into a corner, but he attacked the Talmud with many arguments, and of course retribution was taken against the Jews and their holy books. But the Rashbash wrote a book, Milchemet Mitzvah, which he defended the Talmud. Now, Yeshua Lorki, who was from Lorca in Spain, his baptismal name was Geronimo di Santa Fe. Geronimo di Santa Fe. So if you take the mem for maestro, and Geronimo is a gimel, and Dalet is D, and sin is Santa Fe, and you have mem gimel, Dalet sin, mem gimel. Maestro Geronimo di Santa Fe. You have what word?
Gamad.
Bendes.
Megadeth, which means what? What's a Megadeth?
Comment on dit, traduit Megadeth?
Blasphemer, is it not?
A blasphemer, thank you. Yes, the perfect translation. A blasphemer. Okay, so that's how we Jews get our revenge. We get invented with words. We call them nasty things, but we are actually powerless. We were powerless. That's the operative word until Donna Grazia came along. But anyhow, whatever. So what does the Rashbash write? It's a very famous quote, and it's worthwhile reading. Jean, would you please read line 8? Shenimsa.
שנמצא מינק מבטל הלכה, הוא אמת בעניין ממון, והיותו בלתי אמת בעניין שיש בו איסור, ונהגו בו היתר, שאין יכולת המינק אלא לאסור המותר, אבל לא להתיר את האסור.
Okay, so what we said here is that minhag can abolish halakha in monetary matters, when it comes to money, but not when it comes to religion. Okay. However, in religion, a minhag can come and make what is permitted prohibited. In other words, minhagim often make religious life more difficult. What's probably the most famous example in Pesach of our making? Thank you, the voice on my left. Kitniot is the minhag, makes Ashkenazi life very difficult, and it's a chumrah. We love it, clearly. We've been in love with
Eingebrockt?
We've been in love with kitniot for many, many years. We're more concerned often with kitniot on Pesach than we are with chametz, but that's because our minhagim are very important. Our minhagim are important, this type of minhag. However, if you cannot have a minhag to break halacha, if it's everybody's minhag to eat treif, that doesn't make treif mutar, of course, and that's clear. But minhag mevatel halacha, very important. That line refers to monetary matters only. When it comes to inyanei dat, then minhag is not mevatel halakha. Minhagim can add, you can add, but you cannot take away. There is a gray area. What happens if you have a minhag garua? In other words, there's a minhag that people have taken upon themselves to be stricter. But the rabbis think that because of the strictness, we're going to perhaps endanger a real halachic isur. In that gray area, what do we say? Rabbis have discretion to be mevatel minhag. In other words, bitul minhagim applies because a minhag comes from the people. It doesn't come from the rabbanim. And sometimes the rabbanim will say, look, a particular minhag is doing more harm than good. So although you might want to be more spiritual, make your life difficult, go back to kitniyot. You want to make life much harder for you on Pesach. Some rabbi might say that you might, in fact, get so fed up with kitniyot that you don't even bother to keep the isur on chametz. So perhaps we should get rid of kitniyot and allow people to focus on what's important. There are several other examples in halakha. I'm not going to go into them now unless you want to, and I can explain them afterwards, after the end of the shiur. But that's the gray area. But the goalposts are very clear. When it comes to mammon, minhag is king. When it comes to religion, minhag is not king and needs to pass rabbinic supervision. Okay, so I'm going to read the second extract on line 11. Hai situm takanya lemai hilchata. Gemara in Bava Metzia. Now the story is, well, okay, how do we seal a deal under basic Jewish law? If I want to buy a refrigerator from you, what do I need to do in order to indicate that the refrigerator is now mine?
Kinyan.
What do I need to do?
Kinyan.
Kinyan. No,
Mishika.
Kinyan.
Kinyan.
How do you make a kinyan over a refrigerator?
Mishika.
Pick it up.
Open the door.
Pick it up.
Chalipin.
Okay. I'm talking about the basic underlying din in Jewish civil law is that kinyan is done by mishicha or hagbah. You pull or you lift. Might be a little difficult, but you have to pull the fridge towards you. Okay?
Is it
That
little?
is the basic din. You pull it or you lift it. Animals, you lead, okay? And you do the thing, but it must be an act. You said open the door, maybe very possible, maybe very likely, but whatever is similar to hagba'ah or mishicha. Now, what happens if it's a situmta? What is the situmta? Situmta is a trade practice in the wine trade. In other words, the retailer wants to buy a barrel of Chardonnay, a barrel of Gewürztraminer, a barrel of Merlot, a barrel of Sauvignon Blanc. Okay? He goes to a wholesaler who has rows and rows of barrels full of different wines in his major outlet. Now, the retailer, the shopkeeper, doesn't want to take and pull all the barrels. A, it's difficult to get to them all, and B, he only wants one barrel at a time. But he wants to seal the deal. So what does he do? He takes some red paint and puts it on the barrels that he has bought. We're leaving the money aside. Money will be paid, that's fine. But apparently, at this stage, the Gemara doesn't recognize money, doesn't recognize Halipin as sealing the deal. What we need is a Maaseh Kinyan. So the Maaseh Kinyan is not Mishicha or Hagba'ah. It's taking your little paintbrush, putting some red paint on the barrels you have bought. Is this a kinyan? Lamai hilchata. Rav Chaviva amar lemekanya mamash. There's a machloket. Rav Chaviva says you can make a kinyan even by putting red paint on the barrels that you've bought. Rabbanan amri lekabule alei misha para. Now, what is the opposite of a misha berach? A misha
זה מי שפרה.
What is misha para? Misha para midor hamabul u'me'anshe dor haflaga u'misisra benachal kishon hu yifra mimisha eino omed bediburo. Meaning that the Bet Din gets up on his feet and declares, whoever doesn't keep his word in business transactions is going to receive divine punishment from the same God who punished Pharaoh, who punished Sisera, who punished all those evildoers in the course of Jewish history. You will be punished. But it's only a declaration by a Bet Din. So it may be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have any teeth. Rav Chaviva says, actually it does. You could sue. And what do the Rabbanan say, though? Uva'atran, in a place, the nehigi lemakni, when there's a custom to make a kinyan in the wine trade using the situmta,
ממש.
anu, then it is a kinyan mamash, a real kinyan. So what the Gemara does is that it opens up the traditional lifting or pulling to whatever is an accepted custom in a particular trade. Okay? And now we'll read the Shulchan Aruch. Machar lo bidvarim. I'm going to see if there are any sort of readers here, and I'm going to pick on Shmuley. Line 13. Let's have it in good Gateshead accent.
מכר לו בדברים בלבד, ופסקו הדמים ורשם הלקוח, ורושם על המקח כדי שיהיה
לא סימן.
שלו, כדי שיהיה שלו. אף על
לא,
פי שלא
לא,
נותן
לא.
כדי שיהיה לו סימן ידוע
שהוא שלו.
שהוא שלו,
אף על פי
שלא נותן לו דמים כלום. He was not
Okay.
paid.
right. So what we've said is that if we agree using words, and we agree on the price, okay? And what the buyer does is he says, I'm putting my mark, my situmta, on the object in order that you know it's mine, even though the money has not been paid. Kol hachozer bo achar sherasha mekabel mi shepara. Now, either the seller or the buyer, if they retract, there'll be a mish shepara. The seller will retract. Why? Because the price of, shall we say, refrigerators has gone up. The buyer may want to retract because the price of refrigerators has
down.
gone down. V'ima minhaga midinahu sheikneh haroshem kinyan gamur. But if there is a minhag in this country that you can buy using some type of, as I said, painting or putting a sign on the object that you are buying or selling, niknea mekach, then we have a sealed deal. We got a kinyan. And neither of them can retract under the law. If they do, of course, they can be sued. And whoever losers will have to pay. In other words, you have a suit for breach of contract. And we have to have some kind of verbal indication here, okay? That the lokeach, of course, doesn't steal into the wine cellar at night and put his mark on. He must be done in front of the seller. And all the seller says, put your mark on. In other words, we must know, and it must be clear that the mark is there to seal the deal. Everything that merchants and people in a particular trade use to indicate that they've sealed the deal, this is an advance payment, even of a pruta, a very small down payment. If that's the accepted minhag, it seals the deal. Or if there is a handshake. Well, I hear the voice on my left saying Mazel Brocha. In which trade do we have Mazel Brocha?
Diamond in
Diamonds.
Antwerp.
Diamonds in Antwerp. So
Everywhere.
Maybe
Also here.
everywhere in the world. Correct. In the diamond trade, anywhere in the world, you'll say Mazel or Brocha. Non-Jews have a problem with the Chaf, so it becomes Mazel Brocha. Okay? But there is a handshake. Is there always a handshake?
Yes.
Yes. Okay? They may not
No.
have. No, you're right. Not everybody does the handshake. Today, the words are sufficient because it's such a strong minhag that when you say Mazel and Brocha, that's the deal. It's sealed. Okay? Or you give a key to the place where the object you are buying is stored. So this is the Shulchan Aruch. So we know that if there is a minhag, then it will override the basic halachot. I do not need to pull the fridge or lift it up. I can simply put a mark on it, or I can shake hands, or I can do something. I can give a down payment, okay? Or I can even write some kind of zichron dvarim, some kind of memorandum. If that's accepted, then that becomes the kinyan. So kinyan is an open-ended entity in Jewish law, and we allow the minhag to dominate. All right. So, the question then, of course, is a nice legal question, and here I see if you can make the necessary distinction. We've learned that you can expand the list of methods of making a kinyan according to established local custom. What happens, or does halakha allow you to make an agreement, say, for a future object? Say it's not in the world yet. Can we make an agreement to do something when the thing that we're talking about is not yet in the world?
אין אדם מקנה דבר שלא בא לעולם.
Thank you.
According to halacha, not. But
According to
probably-
halakha, no. Yitz has given us the full line. Davar shelo ba laolam, if it isn't in existence. And
Yes.
Jean, as you've said, if it's not here, because Jewish contract law is very ancient and very concrete. How do I know that we're being really serious? Only if it's an accepted custom to seal the deal, and if what we're talking about is here. For example, if I want to make an agreement with you about, shall we say, the produce of an orchard, apples. But the apples, I want to make a deal with you in January, and the apples will not arrive in the orchard. They won't grow until September. Can we make a deal in January? According to what Yitz and Jean have just said, davar shelo ba'al olam, the answer would be no. But that would be, of course, a very old-fashioned way of doing business. Certainly doesn't jive with what we do today. But let's have a look at the Mordechai, who lived in the 15th century in Germany, okay? Rabbi Mordechai Hillel HaKohen. Okay, we have an agreement about, shall we say, a son who's not yet born. Mother is pregnant. We make a deal about who is going to do the milah, okay? Tzarich lekayem lo. Mordechai says the person who promised to do the Brit Milah cannot disengage. Even though you cannot make a deal of something and the kid is not here yet, it's still in the womb. Because the custom is to do this sort of thing, looking forward to the Brit Milah, it becomes a widespread custom in the Jewish community, and we enforce it. And what is our proof? The situmta becomes the archetype, the major title for all types of extensions of basic Jewish civil law. Not only extensions when you're opening up a list of modes of kinyan, but even when you are apparently flying in the face of what the Talmud considered to be a contract that could not be made. It's too uncertain. And we know, of course, that the basis of all contract law, as the lawyers amongst us will confirm, is how do we know when something is a serious deal or when it is not so serious? And if I can quote famous English law lord, if it's a mere huff, okay? So we need things to tell us that we are serious and we can take this matter to court, okay? Because people break promises every day. Which promises can you take? Which broken promises can you take to court and which not? Every legal system does that, and this is Jewish law. So let's read on. Perush, Roshem Chaviot v'chole, the seal on the barrels of wine. Uvaatra dekanu mamash, kanias sintumta bish. Okay? Filtak shekak nahagu. And when there's an accepted custom, the sintumta seals the deal. Hachinami kach nahagu, case of the Brit Milah, the same. And therefore, I say, Rabbi Mordechai Hillel Kohen, the guy who promised to the Brit Milah has to do it and can be sued. If you have to look for another mohel who can't come, it's delayed, you have to pay for him to come and stay in a hotel, pay for his beer, pay for everything he needs. Okay, you can sue him for breach of contract. But Rabbi Yechiel of Paris, famous for his library and for bringing 300 Talmidim to Akko in the 13th century. There was a great yeshiva in Akko. You can see or read, can see it to this day in the ruins in Akko. Rabbi Yechiel of Paris left Paris with 300 students and took them to the Crusader kingdom and set up a great yeshiva which lasted for a while until, of course, it was destroyed. Omer de'im hu matne ba'oda mu'beret אין כלום. דבר שלא בא לעולם. Rabbi Yechiel makes a nice legal halakhic distinction. He says, look, if it's a fetus, not here yet, there's no boy at the 8th day who's going to be brised. V'lo damya l'situmta. Why is it not like situmta? Dahatam ba la'olam u'mo'il ba'kinyan. When we're talking about extending the list of modes of kinyan, well, okay, we've got the thing that we're talking about here. The refrigerator, as I used, is before us. Question is, how do we make a maaseh kinyan? How do we seal the deal in Jewish law? Then we can extend from the basic Talmudic modes of lifting and pulling to handshaking, down payment, the key to the warehouse, anything you like, mazel bracha, okay? But that's only extending what you can do. You cannot abolish an existing law. And the law says, that Talmud says, we do not make a kinyan or davar shelo ba la'olam. Kilkach mo'il ha'minhag la'chashivo kinyan aval, davar, line 26, shelo yo'il kinyan. But if the kinyan actually doesn't work at all, you cannot make a kinyan of any sort on something that doesn't yet exist. כמו בדבר שלא בא לעולם, לא מצינו שיועיל בו המנהג לחשיבו כקניין גמור. In the Middle Ages, there was an ongoing machloket between the poskim as to whether you could use a customary minhag to seal a deal on something which wasn't yet in the world. But by the time we get to the 18th and 19th centuries, it's clear because commercial practice has become more sophisticated. We're now with Reb Chaim Halberstam, of which Hasidus,
Satmar?
Sans.
Tarnogrod, Sans, Reb Chaim Sansa, the hospital, okay, in Israel, Kiryat Sans, okay. What's the hospital called? Lanyado. It's Sans, okay. Sans became one of the most powerful Hasidim. I'm not going to give you a biography of Reb Chaim Halberstam, because if I do, we'll be here all night. But let's read his psak din. Echad machal lechavero shemen. What's the next word?
Terebinthine.
What is turpentine?
Turpentine is left. It's left as kerosene.
Valenza also.
You use it
It's the
for
fuel.
what?
Yes.
No, you use
It's
it
a
for
solvent.
as a paint thinner, as a solvent, okay, as an industrial solvent. Where does it come from?
Petrol.
Trees.
No, it came from it's resin from a pine tree. Pine tree resin. They used to grow turpentine. Today, of course, it's all artificial. But just like rubber originally came from
Rubber tree.
rubber tree. Thank you. So we have a turpentine tree.
Oh, really?
Rubber in Costa Rica.
In Costa Rica, the voice on my left tells me we actually
Cut the tree.
peeled off the sap and we got cups of rubber. Okay, there we are. Well, okay, turpentine is the same. Certainly in the 18th and 19th centuries. So somebody wants to sell turpentine, which is, of course, going to be the produce of the turpentine trees. But the deal is going to be made in January, and the trees are only going to produce their turpentine oil in September. Now, business works on the basis of futures. In other words, I need money to set up. I want to sell the turpentine because I need to invest in my turpentine orchard, okay? Buy equipment, fertilizer, hire crews. So I want to sell it and get the money now. And I know that people who are interested in turpentine for all sorts of reasons are prepared to buy it. But it's a davar shelo ba la'olam. On the other hand, we're all doing it, okay? We're all buying on the basis of a future yield. All the turpentine is going to be produced in the course of the year, but now we're at the beginning of the year. It's not there yet. Yitz, it's not a davar. Sheba la'olam. V'taku kaf ze lazeh kederech hasocharim. But what did these two do, the buyer and the seller? They shook hands, which was the mercantile practice, minhag hasocharim. V'atah shenitaker hashemen. And now, of course, the buyer bought the turpentine for X, and now turpentine is suddenly, there's a drop. They closed the Straits of Hormuz to turpentine ships, and the only turpentine is from this one guy's orchard. So, of course, he doesn't want to sell it at the price he agreed in January. So the seller says, I'm not going to sell it to you. That was a ridiculously low price. I can get 5 times as much. Goodbye, I'm selling it to the guy who will pay me 5 times as much. So then, of course, they went to a din Torah, and the question was, did the handshake seal the deal? Okay? Reb Chaim Halberstam says, okay, if it's a custom to buy and sell in that mode, the hi'alpi ha situmta. Again, the situmta. Now he says something very important. We're going into the conditions required for a commercial minhag. In other words, you have to have a minhag which is very clear. If there's any doubt about the minhag, then we will not force the parties to abide by it. So Reb Chaim Halberstam says if it was very clear that when this type of deal, when you're buying the annual yield of turpentine orchards, okay, and you're paying now in January for the whole bang lot, then even if it's something which is lo ba la'olam, it doesn't exist yet in front of our eyes, bevadai holchin acharei haminhag. Minhag is king, and we follow the minhag.
Isn't it the same as forward buying and forward selling of currencies today?
That's it will apply to that too. Whenever you are speculating as to future yield, future profit, okay? Lachem, im bigvulchem haminhag barur. It has to be very clear that this, in fact, is a boilerplate. That is, cannot be attacked at all. Boilerplate minhag, and it acts as a kinyan. Then it's situmta. It's a situmta, and therefore it works. Ach tzarich liot galui v'yadua lakol ki im lo barur hadavar eino mo'il misafek. And this is principle number 1. When we accept a commercial custom, it has to be absolutely unequivocal. There must It must be unambiguous. No, it must be exactly clear. The terms of it must be clear. There must be no doubt at all. I'm not going to give you the background to the tshuva. It's a very long tshuva, as you know. Tshuvot are very long, and it goes back and forth. But in the end, Reb Chaim finds that the deal is sealed, and unfortunately, the owner of the turpentine orchard has to accept the lower price, much lower price that he agreed to at the beginning of the year, because proofs were brought that this was a boilerplate minhag. But now we're going to go even one step further. Are words alone sufficient to make a binding kinyan in halakha? Are words alone sufficient? May I remind you that when you got married and you agreed, the guys here, the men agreed to the conditions of the ketubah, your new bride's insurance policy, what did you have to do?
Wave your handkerchief.
Lift up a handkerchief or a pen. You have to do a maaseh kinyan, you have to do a hagbah or a meshicha. Do you all remember that?
Yes, I have seen from others.
If you
If
don't
you
remember
don't-
it, you're not married.
If you know you're married, but you might not need to give your wife her ketubah, Shmuli. Okay? You have to be,
Didn't hear that.
you have to be precise. You're married, but you will not need to give her her ketubah because you never made a boilerplate kinyan, because it's a davar, it's dvarim shebapeh. Okay? It's kinyan dvarim. Now, this is in common with, again, ancient legal systems, even English common law. It wasn't until Slade's case in the early 17th century that the word of a gentleman was considered to be consideration, and you could actually sue someone for breaking their word. Before that, you needed a writ. You needed to have a document, okay? I'm not going to talk about the writs of action and everything that takes us back to law school about 50-something years ago, okay, Shmuley? A long time ago. But the writs of action, as a famous English jurist said, may be buried in their graves, but may be in shackles, but they rule us from their graves. Whatever it is, the idea that you can make a kinyan by words alone is, if you like, an early modern idea. It only gained credence when merchants began to respect their word and absolutely reject any concept of not keeping their word. As one Hungarian gentleman said, I'd rather sell my grandmother than break my word in a business deal. Okay? So I leave you to mull over that. But the Rambam is very clear. The opening halacha in Hilchot Mechira, hamekach eino nikneh bidvarim. You can't make a kinyan with words alone. So according to this, you need to accompany mazel and bracha with a handshake. Even if there are witnesses, Ketzad, I'm selling you a house. So minhag applies even to a house. This wine, and this is the agreed price. Buyer said, I bought. Seller says, I've sold. They tell the witnesses, you be witnesses that this deal has been done. It's nothing. Legally worthless, as if nothing had happened. But that's the halakha and the Rambam in the Middle Ages. The Rosh also says the same thing. Even if there is a custom, we don't apply it. In that context, what happens if you change the order of the letters of minhag? Go from the gimel at the end to the mem at the beginning. What do you get? Gehenna. Because the path to hell is paved with bad minhagim. So that's why rabbis have to exercise judicial review of minhagim. Anyhow.
And the tikiyat kaf?
Ma?
And the tikiyat kaf changed the thing.
You can add, you can have a maaseh. As long as you have a maaseh, the dvarim, though, cannot be the only way of agreeing, okay? It will not be legally binding if it's only words. But Radbaz in 15th century Egypt said something else. Again, it's a long and complicated tshuva, but apparently Egypt, okay, they had a very busy trade with Italy, crossing the Mediterranean Sea, and the merchants would gather at the dockside, and there'd be loads of products, silk, metals, and all sorts of things going from the east to the west, from the Orient to Italy, and merchants would descend and they would talk to each other and they would invest. Okay, Alan, the merchant says, I want to invest in 25% of this load of skins or furs or metals that's going to Venice. Another merchant would say 15%, another would, and they would all take responsibility because, again, ships at sea, as we remember from the Merchant to Venice, how many fleets did Don Antonio lose in Merchant of Venice? Three flotillas carrying merchandise all capsized, and that's why he was going to have to pay his pound of flesh until he was saved by Portia. Thank you. A Daniel who has come unto judgment. Okay, that's for the aficionados of Shakespeare. But Radbaz describes the scene. So all we have here are words. And remember, the ship is about to sail. There's no time to bring a scribe to write a document. They weren't talking in terms of even a handshake, apparently. A word alone, hevei shituf. And that makes you a partner in that freight. This is the custom in Egypt. One word, beinenu, bit like muzzle and brocha. And that word, I am going to share responsibility, both for profit and for loss. Okay, Alan, in this particular freight, that seals the deal. So there is a basic machloket in Jewish law, which I'm not going to expand on, otherwise we'll never get to Dona Grazia, okay, in Jewish law in relation to kinyan dvarim. Osher Weiss, okay, is not so sure about that. He wants a boilerplate kinyan, he wants a maaseh, but I think he's not thinking of business practice. He's thinking of weddings, or on which other occasion have you been asked to lift up a pen or a sudar?
Selling chametz.
Selling chametz. But today, Marcel, do you need to do that?
No, well, we don't.
What do we do?
Electronically.
You can do it through on the
We
computer.
write
On the
it.
computer. And what makes the Maaseh Kinyan? Your finger clicking down on the
On
keyboard.
the computer.
Exactly, that pressure. That's like Hagba'ah and Meshicha, but you have to have something. It couldn't be words alone, okay? So, okay, you know, that is basically, I'm not going to go into that much more. I just wanted to give you a brief discussion, a brief overview of Kinyan, of Minhag and its role in monetary matters in Jewish law. The Rambam, and source number 7, says that the same thing applies. This is very important when it comes to ketubot and marriage settlements. What we do when we get married in terms of money. And the Rambam, I'm going to read this out, says, Hanosei stam kotev noten kiminhag hamedina, because is this in Hilchot Ishut, talking about marriage settlements. וכשתבוא לגבות כתובתה, מקבין לה מה שבכתובתה למנהג המדינה. ובכל הדברים האלו, line 18, all these matters, like I'd say בהן and similar issues, מנהג המדינה עיקר גדול והוא, ועל פיו דנים. מנהג המדינה applies, והוא שיהיה אותו מנהג פשוט בכל המדינה. Now, in addition to clarity of the commercial custom, Rambam brings us the second requirement. It must be widespread. Not just a local minhag. I'm going to add to that, it's either a universal trade minhag in a particular trade or branch of investment banking, or it must be widespread in the country, okay? Either widespread in a particular commercial activity or widespread in the entire country. And finally, Shulchan Aruch says, minhag cannot be invented today. It has to have history and be a precedent. You can't simply come along and say, well, we started this new custom yesterday in the firm, and now we're all bound by it. We have to prove that this is a long-standing minhag. But to sum up, customs in monetary matters have to be clear, they have to be widespread, and they have to be frequent. Okay? So, then the
It's like
section
the
8,
money. The contract must be two ways, otherwise it won't work. Simple.
okay, yeah,
Yes.
sure. But I mean, what we've done here is we have adapted Jewish law or law of the Talmud to the commercial customs of the time.
Yeah.
But we have put three restraints: there's clarity, widespread, and frequent. If you were coming to a Beis Din, Alan, then you'd have to go through this. You go to a regular court, we have official methods, it's a contract or it's not. Good. A contract cannot be immoral, though, even if it involves money. And we have the same thing in secular law. We can make a contract for renting an apartment. We use it for immoral purposes, then that contract will not be valid in court. Okay? So we have something similar. Immoral contract, an example about not respecting the rules of modesty when you're building apartments. Okay, you can read that in the Rashba. You have to provide a partition that preserves people's modesty and doesn't allow the neighbors to look inside their bedrooms. Okay, and the other one is interesting. Number Aleph, it should be Bet, is Rabbi Uziel's statement that the statute of limitations doesn't apply in Jewish law. In other words, the lapse of time will not kill a civil suit. You can't say, well, the time has lapsed, you had 7 years and you didn't sue in time. Sorry. Rabbi Uziel says that does not apply because basically you're permitting theft, okay? Because the debt was not paid and it wasn't brought to court in time, it doesn't mean that the debt is extinguished. In practice, although, the testimony will be unclear, and we have cases in the Responsa literature in which practical considerations mean that you cannot bring a suit after too many years have passed. But the principle is we should not recognize a statute of limitations solely because the years have passed. Now let's have a look at the Mendes estate. Line 34, this is Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev's tshuva. We talked about him last time. He was an appointee of Donna Grazia to the famous yeshiva, okay? And clearly, when the Din Torah, and remember, Donna Grazia, when she was able to practice her Judaism openly, did it with great enthusiasm. She loves rabbis. She loves yeshivas. She spends her money, and she sets them all up. Okay, so, Sheila. What happens when her sister comes to the Bet Din in Constantinople and says, I'm suing my sister, Donna Grazia, and I want the money? Because Donna Grazia got Francisco's wealth because of Portuguese law. As we read last time, they married in a cathedral and Portuguese law, and that was how the money was divided up. And now Donna Brianda says, well, now we're in the Ottoman Empire and the Jews have judicial autonomy. So I want to have a Din Torah and I want my sister to respect the halachic solution, which would divide the estate up between Francisco and Diogo. And I, as Diogo's widow and mother of his daughter, Grazia Chico, I should get half. Money, of course, drives everything. Yilamdenu Rabbeinu. Here we'll see the history in the tshuva. May our rabbi teach us. B'malchut Portugal, in Portugal, yesh chok u'minhag, שהאלמנה תזכה במחצית הנכסים אשר הניח הבעל. the widow gets half of the estate. Ben shechnisa arbe or ma'at b'nidunyata, whether she brought in a large or small dowry. V'yesh listapek davar shelo ba la'olam. First of all, this is a davar shelo ba la'olam. Can we make a kinyan on it? V'gam dahavi b'lo kinyan, af al pi shekotvim ktavim v'chizukim berekot shel goyim. What there are legal documents signed and sealed in non-Jewish courts, that this is what's going to happen to Francisco's estate should he previously die before Dona Gracia. And all the Portuguese Moranos followed this custom. So it is a minhag, and it's a widespread minhag, and there is a maaseh. The maaseh is signatures on a document. And a contract, of course, a written contract will be binding, and also on property. Tabu is binding if you register your land purchase in the land registry, binding under halakha. Umetu otam hayudim ba'oto hamalchut, v'achar kach ba'im almana v'yorshim leTurkia lechasot tachat kanfei hashchina. So clearly this is Dona Gracia. She's not mentioned by name, but this is the Mendes family. Yoreinu more tzedek. Im zochot elu almanot b'machasit hanechasim kiminhag oto hamakom asher nis'u shama. Do we follow the custom of the place where they got married? Or dilma v'lo yavina lehu ela nidunaita shechnisu lebalehen? Or following halacha, all Dona Gracia will get is the nadan, the dowry. The same for Dona Brianda, but their daughters will then divide the estate. Tshuva, Mari Ben Lev, Yeraeli dechol apin shavin. It's all equal, but let's fake it, there's no doubt. Dona Gracia is justifiable in holding on to a full half of the estate. והיכא שרבים הסכימו אפילו שאינם כל בני העיר, שהם כל בני האומנות, שבאותו העיר, שהסכמתם קיימת בלי שום קניין. We know in the laws of minhag, in monetary matters, that when everybody agrees, kol b'nei ha'ir, everybody follows that custom, or kol b'nei ha'umanut, all people in the trade, you don't need a traditional kinyan. Didn't matter that they didn't lift anything up, didn't matter that there was no lifting up of a pen or of a handkerchief. They signed on, it's an accepted minhag, that's enough. Ad kan lashon Rashba, that goes back to the Rashba. V'kevan dechen hu benidon didaan mitzad haminhag, shenagu shanosei isha b'stam di choleket hanechasim em hayorshim mechza b'mechza, and since the half division is Portuguese law, milta depshita hi dali b'dekoli alma dezakta almana b'machasit hanechasim. Dona Gracia stays with the fortune she's got. V'chen katav Rambam, as we read in Hilchot Ishut, the same thing if it's a minhag pashut b'chol hamedina. V'chen katav la'neitar al Yitzchak bar Sheshet the Rivash, same thing. B'inyanei ha'kniyot v'chen b'schirut ha'poalim, hiring laborers and anything else. The minhag is king, and you cannot avoid the minhag, provided, of course, there was no special contract. In other words, if I hire workers to do a job for me, then they will say, I work from 9 until 5, if that's the custom. Unless you specify that you want them to work from sunrise to sunset, because according to the Talmud, the working day is from sunrise to sunset. As we say in Barchi Nafshi, Adam Yotzei Lefa'a Aloto, with the rise of the sun, and he chozer abaita ba'erev, when the sun goes down. But and unless I hear from the voice on my left, unless we are in Alaska, then you'll never stop working. And if you're north of the Arctic Circle, you're condemned to work.
You never start working.
And then the rest of the year, you never start. Okay, fine. But this is the Rivash. Now we're going to talk about Bnei Ha'ir when we talk about the Ancona boycott, internal Jewish legislation. Bnei Ha'ir are the 7 good men of the town, the Boni Vairi, who laid down Jewish takanot. We're going to come to that, but that's takanot takahal next week. מכל הני יראה דבר ברור. ואפילו היה מנהג הזה במקום אחד בארצותינו, היה מבטל ההלכה. This will apply even if it was in Turkey, where the Jews do have autonomy. We will respect the minhag. וכל שתי מיעוטם באותו המלכות, נוהגים באותו מנהג, והמנהג הוא פשוט וקיים בכל המדינה, או בא והבעל מת באותו המלכות אשר שם חוק ומשפט המנהג ההוא, ואחר כך בא האלמנה והיורשים בטורקיה לחסות תחת כנפי השכינה. מילתא דפשיטא הוא, it's obvious. ולא מבעיה אם תפסה האלמנה במחצית הנכסים דין מוציאים מידה. Not only would we leave the half in Donna Grazia's hand had she grabbed it without a din Torah, אלא אפילו היו כל הנכסים ברשות היורשים, even if the other relatives who succeed under Torah law had obtained into their possession the estate, מוציאים מידם ונותנים לאלמנה חלקה. המגיע לפי חוק המנהג מהמלכות ההוא. וכבר בא מעשה לידי וכיוצא בזה פעמים רבות בסלוניקי, וכן דנתי ומעולם לא שמעתי וראיתי שום חולק בדבר הזה, ותו לי לא מידי. Very clear, this is what we do. Now the Marashdam adds another element here. He, as you remember, was appointed by Donna Grazia to be the head of this very special rabbinic school in Salonika, where bright young men came with their wives. They spent a certain number of years learning, and then they went off to be rabbis. Im lo ken, we don't honor the financial arrangements made when the Moranos were in Spain or Portugal. Lo shavkat chaim lechol b'nei ha'anusim. What are the Moranos going to do when they come here to the Ottoman Empire and they can practice as Jews again and they can go to Din Torah? שנעשו ונתנו אלו עם אלו, יחזרו עתה לתבוע אלו מאלו על זכויות השעבודים שנעשו שם. Are we going to undo every single financial arrangement made when they were Moranos in Spain and Portugal? שלא כדין Torah, because they were not according to the Torah, אלא על פי מנהג מקומם. זה ודאי שאינו עולה בדעת. This doesn't make any sense. Okay? אלא על מה שנעשה שם נאמר, מה דעבר עבר, what happened, happened. Now we open a new page. From now on, we follow Jewish law. Now the Mabit, the famous Rabbi Moshe Ditrani, will talk about, when we talk about the Ancona boycott, he says that there's a question of the wedding itself. When all of this was done, when they signed on, or when Portuguese law applied, they went through a wedding ceremony that was an absolute nullity, non-existent in Jewish law. Does that destroy the strength of the financial minhag? In other words, do we say it's all part of a goyish ceremony that has no relevance to Jews, and therefore the whole thing should be canned and dismissed? Mabit makes an interesting point which actually reflects on civil marriage. He says, you know what? The only option the Moranos had in Spain and Portugal to marry was in church. There's no other way. V'havu legarmaihu eshetish. Now, what does the word legarmaihu mean? It's Aramaic, of course, famous in the Gemara.
Ligrom.
What?
Ligrom.
No. It's legarmaihu means bishvilam, for them, for their sake. Okay, legarmaihu eshetish. What Jews did in Spain and Portugal to make them married couples was they went to church and there was a priest and they did this particular ceremony. The onshina ba'aleha, and if the wife was unfaithful, she would be punished. Ha'ika hana'ad mahani adadi. What the Mabit says is slightly differently. We have what we call here tumura, or consideration. In other words, when do I commit to a financial deal? When I get something in return. I sell, you buy. I give you the refrigerator, you give me the money. There's a hana'ah here, okay? Both sides. I get the refrigerator I need, you get the money which you want for selling the refrigerator. So what I've gotten here, says the Mabit, is a context in which both sides, as it were, gain. The Jewish side, the Marano side, wants a marriage, an official marriage. Everybody wants to be officially married, even if the state won't recognize it, okay? So that is obtained by going to church. Doesn't matter that church has no standing in Jewish law, that the whole thing's a farce, okay? Because under Jewish civil law, there is mutual benefit. Tamura, v'hachinami anusim elu mahanyeluhu dahavi ishto. This is what makes a married couple in Spain and Portugal. Im ken kishematnim t'nai mamon b'shat hanisuin, gamri umaknu bahi hanaa dekamithani. You get gemirut dat because the Jewish side profits. It gets a recognized marriage. Therefore, we use both. Now, Rabbi Yosef Karo is the one great halakhic authority who disagreed, but then he wasn't supported by Donna Grazia. So he says the fact that it was done in a church removes all, but he was in the great minority. Donna Grazia won. Now, Michael Rosenfeld, I promised you some Hebrew. Would you like to read from line 34? This is a case 2010 here in Israel in a rabbinical court.
I have a question.
Chat. Jean, I'm at the question time, okay?
Yes.
Michael, Yerushat.
ירושת העתק של משפחת מנדס, פרניסוקו
Francisco de Diego, that's your Spanish.
דייגו,
עמדה
עמדה במרכזו של פולמוס נוקב, אשר
נוקב.
אשר הרעיש את עולם ההלכה באותה תקופה.
So
השאלה
what have we said there? The Mendes family inheritance was the cause of a huge pulmus debate and a controversy at that time. Okay, and all the great halakhis were involved.
השאלה העקרונית שדידונה אז הייתה, האם יש להכיר בנישואים קתולים כמנהג המדינה?
Are we going to recognize a Catholic wedding as minhag
השלכותיו הממוניות או לא?
We're only interested in the monetary aspect, the marriage, okay? But it's still a Catholic ceremony.
שאלה זו הופנתה לגדולי הפוסקים שבאותו דור, לרב יוסף בן לב, לרב שמואל די מדינה, לרב משה מיטרני ורב יוסף קארו. הרי רואים מכל הפוסקים שגם במקום שלא יועיל קניין רגיל, כמו דבר שלא בא לעולם, ובכל זאת יועיל בהם מנהג המדינה שיחייב כקניין באופן המועיל. לדעת פוסקים רבים יש תוקף לזכויות ממוניות ואפילו לירושת האישה עיזבון בעלה כאשר נישואיהם היו נישואים אזרחיים. כפי הנראה זו גם הייתה הגישה המעשית הרווחת באותה תקופה, כפי שהעיד על כך המאמר, וזאת בניגוד לדעתו של בית יוסף.
So here in 2010, we have a modern rabbinical court deciding an issue of inheritance under non-Jewish law in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Israel, we're going to apply the non-Jewish law, because even though the marriage was a civil marriage, it is minhag, and minhag applies and overrides halakha in dinei mamonot, even in the context of marriage and inheritance. So we see here a very interesting development. I'm going to mention the last source. Miller against Miller was a secular Israeli decision, which involved the same question. If a couple comes on Aliyah, and say under French law or Swiss law, the property was going to be divided in a certain way, and they come here to Israel and the law is different, which law applies? The law where they are now when they get divorced, or the law under which they got married? And following the Mendes famous precedent, Israeli secular law decided that we follow the custom of the place from which they came. אגב, כדאי להעיר שהמשפט דומה במידה רבה למשפט Nichols against Curlier. Don't know whether you remember this case, but in England in 1856, there was a case of an English couple who got married in France. They came back to live in England. Then there was a dispute. Which law would apply to division of property, French law or English law? This is, if you like, conflict of laws, okay? Private international law. And the decision was we follow French law. Nimsa, so Justice Asaf in the Israeli case, which is very similar, Nimsa b'sifrut hashut. Asaf said we don't need to go to the Nichols and Curlier. We've got the shut. מאמצע המאה ה-16 הוא המשפט המפורסם שבין האישה הגדולה חנה גרציה מנדס ובין אחותה הצעירה וגיסה. המשפט הובא לפני גדולי הדור בטורקיה ובארץ ישראל. Okay, so that's just to put our history in context, which I love doing. We're also going to see tshuvot next week about the Ancona. Can you force a community to stop sending its ships to Ancona and send them to Pesaro for the sake of the Jewish people and getting revenge on the Catholic Church? So this again is a highly debated topic in the Sifrut Hashut at that time, and it's interesting to see what the halacha relies on. After that, we'll move on to the smicha issue. Why in the 16th century did the rabbis in Tzfat want to reintroduce smicha and recreate the Sanhedrin and all of that jazz as well? But in the meantime, the problems of the Jews in Spain and Portugal come out in these tshuvot, and in the tshuva we do not read. And it's just interesting to see how halachic texts can very easily and very nicely talk history. So we have halacha and history marching, as it were, hand in hand. Okay, questions. Jean, you wanted to ask one?
Yes, I have. Donc, from this, it results that the financial prenuptial agreement taken before a notaris must be accepted by the Rabbanut.
A financial agreement,
yes,
made between, made between
a
couple will be accepted by the
Bedin.
By the Bedin. Why not?
And similarly, in the prenuptial agreement, for example, in Israel, there are many complications because of the asmarta. If we would take the same before the civil law, we could do it without any complication, that it would be accepted.
Well, there may be some issues there. Israel does actually have a law called the Married Woman's Property Law that does talk about the validity of a prenuptial agreement. Whether a Bet Din would accept that or not, a lot depends also upon a policy, not principle. The Bate Din in Israel do not like the PNA, the prenuptial agreement, because they say the whole purpose of that PNA is not actually to make a financial agreement, but it is to create a fictitious agreement, and a waiver, which will then kick in to force the wife to. It's not really a financial agreement. It's a means of putting pressure on the husband to give his wife a get. And that is a whole different ball game. I'm not sure if in the state of Israel, you went to a secular court and you said what you just said. We have a financial agreement made between the husband and wife. This is the PNA that if 6 months there I leave and he doesn't give me the get, then he'll have to pay a large amount of money. I'm not sure, and the voice on my left will have something to say, whether that actually will be actionable in court or not. Voice on my left?
I missed that.
Okay. Well, we will return to the voice on my left another time. But I will just have a last word here. It's not clear because, Jean, it is not actually a financial agreement made at the time. It is basically another way, indirectly, of making the husband give his wife a get. I'll just explain to you what this PNA is. The halachic PNA is an agreement signed at the time of the wedding, It's used by modern Orthodox. The Haredim do not accept it. And what it says is that husband agrees, like as part of the Ktubah, to give his wife $1,000 per day as his Erksut ve'ona. But
You exaggerate about the
yeah,
amount.
okay. But the wife is going to waive. She's going to be mavateret, ochelet on this sum, okay? And she's going to be happy with whatever her husband gives her. $5 a day, okay?
If she wants.
Until at such time, the couple basically split. I'm not going to go into all the details now, but the couple split. And after a certain time, after the bet din, after there is an issue of a get, and the get is not forthcoming, the wife then says, I am withdrawing my mechila, and I have to pay me $1,000 a day, or whatever the sum is, okay? Now, what's the purpose of that? To make him give her the get. The wife does not want to get this large sum of support. She wants to get out of the marriage. It was invented by Rabbi Shalom Messas when he was in Morocco, when they introduced civil marriage in Morocco. Okay, for exactly this reason, husbands would be civilly divorced and not bother to give their wives a get. And how could you force the husband? Very difficult. So this was an agreement that was made at the time of the marriage, and the wife could then go to a civil court and say, he contracted, I waived vitur or michilah on this agreement, but we both agreed that if we are separated for a certain amount of time, I can cancel my revocation, mevatel et havitur, and now he has to pay me the sum he agreed. So it is as it were a contract. There was a kinyan, it was signed. Okay, we do it according to Jewish law. It is a davar shalom ba'olam, but that's fine because we know that if there's a minhag to do so, it can be done. Now that is not the same as a regular financial agreement. People often in second marriages will make financial agreements so that, you know, their family remains their sole heirs and the other family does not. And we sort of, you know, divide that up much more carefully. This is a different sort of thing. And what Jean said quite correctly is that in Israel, Batei Din Rabbanim say we don't like this because we have the tools to make the husband give a get if he really needs to give a get. There's a really terrible case, we could send it to jail. If it's a less terrible case, we can deprive him of all sorts of government support, okay? We won't give him a driving license, we won't give him a passport. If he's a prisoner, we won't give him all the extra prisoner's rights. We won't give him lines of credit. And there's also the social thing. You can do harchakot the Rabbeinu Tam. You can shame him on the internet and all of that. So we don't need this PNA here. In America, in England, France, in Chutz La'aretz, the PNA in Orthodox circles is highly regarded because Batei Din in Chutz La'aretz, Jack, have no power, right? Exactly. So therefore, the PNA is the next best thing. So on that note, I see everybody stayed awake, so that's good. We will continue with the Ancona. See how that Ancona boycott the Donna Grazia tried to get going. That, in fact, is discussed by many poskim. Well, again, cherry pick. We'll take a few out and look at see how halakha does indeed talk history. So everybody have Besorot Tovot and Shabbat Shalom and all good wishes. That's it for tonight. Thank you, Mickey. You can stop the recording, and we will get together in